Have you ever believed the hype of a book so much only to be completely disappointed by it? I mean, probably, it's not that uncommon, it's a normal thing that happens. Well, it just happened to me. Last Friday, I set off on a trip to my friend's house, which is like a 3-hour drive away. But I was so obsessed with picking up this one book that I'd heard so much hype around that I actually stopped, popped into my local bookshop, picked up a copy of this book, and carried on to my friend's house. That whole weekend, that book sat in my bag and I was like, oh, I can't wait to read this when I get home. It's gonna be so good. I read 60 pages before I DNF'd it. This book is a tragedy. It is a god-awful thing. And I don't usually make angry videos like this about bad books, but my god, I think this thing has put me in a reading slump because it's part of a genre that I really, really enjoy. It has so many elements that I really enjoy, and a lot of the books on my TBR have those elements, and now I don't want to read them, and that really sucks, and I hold this book accountable. This book, by the way, is A Dark and Drowning Tide by Alison Saft. This god-awful, dreadful thing. I hate you. I made it 67 pages, I think, into this thing before I gave up, slammed it shut and cast it aside. This thing is dreadful. And I was so excited. I can't stress enough how much I wanted to read this. It is a dark, sapphic, fantastical work of dark academia. It should be wonderful, and it is not. First of all, the sapphic element is not clear from the get-go because you can tell it's an enemies to lovers affair. Our protagonist has an academic rival, they're both women, they both hate each other. One is from a downtrodden community of people and the other is a rich lord's daughter, and you know that they're eventually going to fall in love because this is enemies to lovers, but oh my god, it's so bland right from the beginning. I can't tell you how tropey and awkward it is. Oh, they hate each other, oh, they're academic rivals, I wonder how this is going to end. God, spare me. The book is set in a fantasy world that is not fleshed out in the slightest. She's trying to avoid exposition, and I understand that, feeding us bits of information as we go, but they're not the right bits of information, and they're not enough. And you don't get anything from the dialogue because these characters are entirely interchangeable. The premise is that our protagonist, Lorelei, is a 20-something academic. She's been studying under a very famous teacher for a long time. She has an academic rival. They are the 2 star pupils of this professor, and the 3 of them are all about to set out on a quest for the king. The king wants to find basically the fountain of youth, and so he has sent out like 8 rich nobles, a famous professor who's also a famous explorer, and also a bunch of other things. She's like perfect and famous in every way. And also her 2 star pupils who are both supposed to be like 25 years old and talk and behave like idiot teenagers. So they set out on this quest, but before that happens, and I DNF'd it just as the quest was beginning, we establish a little bit about this world. The king is fairly young. His father and his father conquered and annexed a bunch of neighboring countries and cities and stuff. Our protagonist is from one of those now annexed little nations. And it's established very early on that this is very much a Jewish metaphor. She lives in a ghetto, and her people are downtrodden in society. Good metaphor, good allegory, let's see how it's explored. What's really weird about it is that this ghetto is empty. She's the only person who lives in it, and this is a problem throughout the whole book. Nobody lives in this world. It's empty. It is not populated by people at all. Where is everyone? Like, our protagonist says that her people are downtrodden, they are second-class citizens. We take her word for it. We don't see any evidence of it. She is very, very self-hating. She has internalized so much of this hatred. And of course, I understand. I'm a trans person living in 2024. I understand internalizing so much hatred and nastiness, but we only know the internalized stuff. And when I say that her world is empty, what I mean is that she comes from this place, and she says at one point that no one from their world, their people, can never make anything of themselves, except for the fact that she wrote a letter to this professor that she really looked up to because her dad bought her a book written by this professor this one time, and the professor just went, okay, great, you're my star pupil now. And that whole gap between reading this book and becoming the star pupil, I don't know. I don't know what happened. You just accept that it happened. But not only is she the star pupil, she's also friends with the king because this kingdom has like 10 people in it. Like, her academic rival says that she has her eyes on the king and she flirts with him. And she says to our protagonist, hey, you could flirt with the king too, or you could be better friends with the king too. Why does she even have any contact with the king? How is this whole society set up? It feels like there are 3 tiers. You've got the king, you've got a bunch of nobles and academics, and 2 children who are also 25. Where's everybody else? Why is she so close to the king? Why is the king sending out a group of his best friends who are all nobles and 2 children who are 25? Where is the structure? Where is the society? There is nothing coherent here. Alison Saft has said, there's an oppressed group of people, there are nobles, there's a king, that'll do. And I'll just cherry pick 1 or 2 people from each of these groups. What? The world is completely empty. How does any of this hierarchy, how do these connections, this web of people interconnected, how does it work? Why does she know the king? And this isn't even the worst part. The worst part of the whole book is the dialogue. Dialogue is typically a tennis match, a back and forth question answer. Something person A says has an effect on person B, and person B replies, and you know how conversations work. That's not the case here. A conversation between 2 people is each of those people saying a random thing and the other person saying whatever's on their mind, or just pushing the plot forward in a different direction. Just listen to this. So they just set out on their journey, and Lorelei sees a bird that's like a raven, it's a bad omen, and she says, shoo. She says, "Begone, damn you." And she thinks, wow, I'm glad no one else was around to see me do that. How embarrassing, shooing a bird away. But someone else was there. And that person says, well done. And Lorelei says, how long have you been there? Long enough. I was just setting up my equipment. I didn't mean to disturb you. Then there's a bit of narrative, and then Lorelei says, what are the wires for? The other person raises her eyebrows and says, I didn't realize you had any interest in thaumaturgy. Lorelei says, everything that happens on this ship is of interest to me. The other person says, of course, congratulations are in order. What? Why? Why are they in order? I don't. And then Lorelei just says, whatever it is you're doing, wrap it up. They're expecting us. Who? Why? Why are they? You didn't say you were in a rush. This person's just set out their equipment. They're obviously a smart, intelligent adult. They knew they had time to do whatever they're doing. They're a fucking professional on a quest to do a thing. They are the thaumaturgists, right? They're gonna set out their equipment and do their job, and Lorelei, who we know is like downtrodden because she said so many, many, many times, she says she has no respect, no one takes her seriously, but she suddenly goes to this adult professional who's older and more experienced than her, she goes, come on, pack up your things, they're expecting us, we're in a rush. Are we? How do you know that? You haven't mentioned that. You can't just say these things to push the plot forward. You can't just throw this in randomly. It doesn't make any sense. And all the dialogue is like this. You've got Lorelei, who is from a very, very oppressed people because she's told us. You've got her academic rival, I've forgotten her name now, and she's bossy and snooty because she's a noble. And then you've got all the other ones, and they're all the same person. Even the king has no personality. Their teacher, Ziegler, I think her name is, she's got no personality either. None of them, they're all interchangeable. Their names are all vaguely Germanic. You can tell that there's a World War II influence, again. Lorelei is very obviously supposed to be from an underclass of people in a Germanic fairy tale kind of a world, so you see how the metaphor is supposed to exist as her as a second-class Jewish citizen in a World War II but also fairy tale coded Germanic, maybe Germanic kind of a world, but it's so vague and poorly thought out and explored, and the characters are not well defined at all. We only know she's oppressed because she's told us that. And I honestly think that the dialogue, the way it makes no sense at all, the way characters just say random things to each other as they feel like it honestly gave me a headache. I felt like I was reading a jumble of words that didn't coalesce, didn't align at all. I've read a lot of bad books in my life, and I usually keep going at least a little bit longer than this. Maybe I'll give up halfway, or even towards the end when I run out of steam before the finish line. But this book is like 350 pages, and I gave up after 60. It's so tragically bad. You know that the sapphic stuff is going to unfold in a really awkward, dreadful way. These characters are not real people. The world has not been thought out at all. It's supposed to be an allegory for the oppression of Jewish people, but it doesn't ring true at all when all we have is this one very angry, sad woman's very angry, sad words, but no actions, no world building, no setup, no conversations to support it, just her being embittered. And I understand being embittered, but what about? We don't see anything. It is so poorly thought out, and the dialogue means nothing. I am so shocked by the waste of time and energy that this book is. It's just fantasy racism with no context, completely interchangeable characters who say nothing of value, dialogue that has kind of been put together like the letters in a ransom note. They don't coalesce or create any kind of thoughtful conversation. This is lazy character writing, lazy world building, lazy metaphor writing. And it's also supposed to be gothic. What is gothic about this? It's not how dark academia works. You can't just make these people academics and say it's dark. That's not how it works. This thing is offensively boring and poorly thought out. I am so angry. I spent 20 quid on this. £20. And it's put me in a reading slump. Thank you so much. Ugh. Waste of time. Subscribe for books.